Mhm. All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Educate Colin Snap channel. How you doing? Hope you guys have been doing well. We have another month, another story. And this is a big one today, so let's get right into it. So we have our March Spotlight Cast tier list. The strategies, the ratings, they haven't really changed ever since I started this. S to D, S, A, even B are all pretty solid choices. C, you have to think about a little bit. D, um, could work. It does depend if you really like the particular card or the spotlight. It's kind of the same vibe. We have a couple things. First thing is the series season pass. This one is Agamotto. So this is a pretty cool card. Game start, so another game start effect. Definitely getting a lot of these now. You shuffle four Ancient Arcana into your deck. Now, what are the Ancient Arcana? It's a 512, 510. The Ancient Arcana, we have four of these. Temporal Manipulation, which just gives Agamotto 3 power and it puts it in your head if it's not in play. Now, if it's not in play, it means even if it's discarded or destroyed, you still get it. So I don't think there's like a particularly super cool like a discard or destroyed decks you're gonna make with that, but it does mean that if you end up losing it somehow, maybe some random ability, you can get it back. So that's quite nice. And then it's a 1/3, which isn't bad. It's not like broken, but it's not bad like amount of power to give your Agamotto. So pretty good card here. We have Winds of Watum, which in play ends up being like the strongest in my opinion, just because moving a card is very powerful and -5 power is also pretty good. So you end up being able to win lanes with this card, right? Like this is a win laner for 2 energy, so end up being pretty powerful. And then next up we have Bolts of something. It's 3 energy, and then when you play, you get next year you get 4 energy. So this allows you to do some like pretty powerful combo turns, essentially, right? You can end up getting 10 energy, on the final turn, or you can use this to ramp up something huge. People have been doing this to get Eson early, and then having Eson early is really nice. So there's some pretty cool combos with this. It also all of these cards are super broken, and what Sinister London and the one that makes 4 copies of your cards, because you play this, it disappears, and then you summon 4 more, and it disappears. So you get 5 procs, and the lane's still open to do super stupid stuff. So you just get like those locations where you can re-trigger cards. Normally, filling your location is the big weakness there, but with these spells that banish themselves, there's like no real drawback to dropping them in there. So it can get like kind of nasty, which like it is that like a balance concern? I don't know. I guess if you know they have Agamotto in those decks, like you're already aware, so it's like okay, maybe I need to be careful about my snaps, but it is like OP in those locations. And then you have the images of Icon, which to me is like transform your cards into Agamotto. I do think there's some other like cooler things you can do, but the most consistent strategy to me is just like you win a lane, right? If you just transform into Agamottos, you have 13 power Agamottos. It's like so much, right? So it's just like 52 power in a lane. That's hard to deal with, but there are some other cooler things if you want to experiment with that. But overall, these are like generically good spells or skills to have, and they do work. It is a little bit they're not they're not forcing you into a particular archetype. If I was gonna say, like they don't playing these don't mean you're playing destroy or you're playing move or you're playing some type of rap deck. Like these are just like generically good cards that work. So it ends up being a little bit more flexible than I would expect, but it's still there is a still pretty big drawback to it in that you're running a bigger deck, right? You're running a 16 card deck by playing this instead of a 12 card deck. So anything that relies on combos, relies on specific pieces, they get a lot worse. not a lot, but like they get noticeably worse if you're looking for like a particular card that's like your main win condition. So you do have to be running like a deck that doesn't necessarily need any particular card, but is full of like good powerful units, like a good stuff deck. So I think that's the one like caveat of this type of deck compared to like Thanos, where like your stones draw you, so it kind of balances out. And and then Arisham is just like gambling, right? So it doesn't really matter there. This one you do have to make sure that all the cards you're running are like synergistic and individually, so you aren't relying on this one particular draw to save you when your deck is already bigger than normal. But with that in mind, this card is still good. This card is still fun to play. I think that's really quite important these days with cards. Like, am I enjoying my time playing with Agamotto? And I would say yeah. So, and the card's pretty good. There's some cool combos you can do. It opens up some deck designs that aren't available before, especially the bolts. Being able to get 4 energy or save like bank 4 energy for another turn allows for some plays I haven't really been able to do before. So that's pretty cool. The spells are generically good, so this is a pretty good season pass for me. When I say it's stronger, it's not stronger than Sam Wilson. You know what I mean? Like Sam Wilson's still way better, but hopefully that card gets nerfed. And it's like not as like egregious, but like I would say like, this is a pretty good one. A lot of the spells are good. There is a drawback, like having a bigger deck to me is like a realistically like meaningful drawback. But other than that, like a card is good, the card is fun to play. So I'm happy with this one. All right. And then the other thing I want to talk about before we get started on the spotlights is that there was a series drop very recently. And I'm happy to see this because I was recently talking about how we have these really old spotlight cards that every time they're in the spotlight, they just make the whole spotlight worse because all the cards are like, it just lowers the quality of these old cards that you probably have. Everyone like either has them or doesn't care about them, right? Those are like the two options you have for these cards. And they just there's so many of them that they just remove the consistency of a spotlight. So they did a big drop. A lot of cards moved down to Series 3. A decent amount moved down to Series 4, which does matter. I wouldn't say it matters as much as moving to Series 3, but it does matter. Like they're cheaper to get. They're half off essentially if you wanted to get them in tokens, and it does make uh, evaluating these spotlights a little bit harder because you kind of have to recalibrate just because you were so used to these. I would say bad spotlight weeks where it's like, okay, there's a new card that's cool, and then there's two bad cards or cards that people have, so it's like hard to recommend. A lot of that is lessened. There's still some, but it's definitely lessened, and it's a lot harder to intentionally create those. So because of that, it's a lot easier to have overall better spotlight weeks. So I'm going to have to see like how does this actually feel in the new spotlight meta or new economy that we have here. So definitely hope they continue to do this. I think it's a good move for sure, especially with all the like the stuff they've given us. You know, I didn't really talk about Sanctum. People think it's grindy. I do also think it's pretty grindy, but I think it's also quite generous, especially with the Twitch drops. Without the Twitch drops, with the Twitch drops, I think you could just like use the Twitch drops and like barely try, and then you'll get like a decent amount. Not everything, but you'll get like a pretty good amount of rewards if you just rely on that. You don't have to like spend your days in the mode. But yeah, overall, happy to see the series drops. Do think they're important. So with that in mind, now we can get started. So first thing we have Eson. So Eson this is not the ability of Eson. I wonder if I did that for all of them. I hope not. But Eson's actual ability is something I should mention real quick. So Eson's ability is end of turn. You put a created card from your hand here. So it's not ongoing or like that. Wonder why that happened. But create cards in your hands is not that easy. Now, if you're playing Agamotto, you might say it's very easy, but I would say other than Agamotto, it's not that easy to put creative cards in your hand that you really want to summon. I would say like Nick Fury, White Queen or so. Like those can do it. Nick Fury probably being the best, generally, but Nick Fury isn't the most used card until Eson came out, that kind of thing. But um, with the ramp with Agamotto, I do think Agamotto is a pretty good synergy. So I think it's a pretty smart idea that they put them together so that you can immediately see like, hey, there's an impact if you run both of these together. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I would say like the main issue is that Eson requires like a specific deck. It's not a generically good card. You have to build around Eson in some capacity, or run like Agamotto or some other like generically good generators. But you do have to build around it, so it's hard to see. Oh, will this be like complete meta? I do think if you can build around this card is nutters, right? Like it wins you the lane, right? It's a 6-drop win the lane essentially if you can play it out. So those type of cards are pretty powerful. We've seen Red Hulk, we've seen Blob, we've seen those type of like big bombers where you play the card, you win the lane. This does require more setup, right? So like if you have to spend more than 6 energy to win the lane. Because if you're playing Nick Fury, right, like you are playing a 4-drop instead of a different one, and even though you do win the lane, you are spending some investment, so it's a little bit more expensive than a 6-drop win the lane. But in that context, it's still pretty good. So decent card. I would say it's actually like the weakest. Maybe weakest is the wrong word, but the least priority for me this month for the new cards, which is interesting. But it's still pretty good, right? Like all the cards released are pretty good. Is something to take in mind. But when we come to series drops, it's next to Beta Ray Bill and Wiccan. Beta Ray Bill is not really super meta. Not really. There isn't that much decks that play. It's just store decks that really play Beta Ray Bill. There isn't a ton of other decks that really add this card into their decks, unfortunately. So if you like Thor, you want to play that, it's good. But other than that, there aren't really any other like niche strategies that you're using with Beta Ray Bill. It just costs a lot. Compared to Thor, you can actually run Thor in random decks, and it can make sense. Wiccan though is very good. They nerfed it, so it's a little bit worse than it used to be. It used to be a 4/7, but it's still pretty powerful. It is like not a consistent card. People, to me, they talk about this card like it's consistently guaranteed, and I don't agree. You do have to make sure your draws are good, and your draws won't always be good. You can kind of force it, but if you force it, um, you don't have enough big things a lot of times for the payoff to be consistent, right? Either the trigger is consistent or the payoff is consistent. You know what I mean? And it, I haven't seen a deck where both are consistent, in my opinion. So, but it's still very good. It's still a very nice, powerful payoff. So if you do want to play those type of decks, and it's one of those cards that if you don't have, you'll miss. Like it is a card that dictates decks. In that, if you don't run this card or you don't have this card in your collection, you're missing out on a number of decks that need this card. So it's quite strong to have in your collection, just to have the opportunity to play all these new strategies or things that revolve around Wiccan. So pretty good card to get. Beta Rebel not as much, and then Eson by itself, I'm not the biggest fan of. I think they're in this new Spotlight meta economy. There's a lot of better spotlights you could send 4 keys on. So that's my thoughts on Eson. Next up, we have Starbrand. Now, this one, ongoing 310. That's always a stat line to look at. Your opponents have +3 power at each other location. So you can kind of do the math and say, okay, if I play this, you're giving your opponents 3 power in these 2 locations. It's kind of a 3-4. Now, I would say that's not really true because you only have to win 2 of 3 locations. So there's one location you can fundamentally ignore. So this is kind of like a 3-7. And in that context is a lot better. That opens up Scar synergies, and it's just like a very powerful bomb. It's a 3/7 bomb, like it's this card seems very good to me. Like I don't really see the downside that much for me when I look at this card. I'm like, yeah, it's a 3/7, 3/4 maybe, but unlikely. But yeah, very good card. So, um, especially if you're running Scar, it definitely seems like something you'd pay off. And ongoing decks um, they have a lot of room, I would say, to add new cards in, and this is a one that I think you could probably fit in. So next to Fastos, next to Scar. I really like this. This is something I think they missed before when they were introducing cards that had synergies that or like cards that relied on other cards. They didn't put the card it relied on in the spotlight. So you were kind of like though I mean it was the issue was like it was like Surtur season pass, right? There were so many people that were like, okay, Surtur is broken. However, I didn't get Scar way back when, and there was not any spotlights, so I'm just like kind of stuck here. And I think that felt really bad for players. So I like this that they're like, okay, Starbrand is obviously a Scar card, obviously a Surtur Scar card. We're putting Scar in the spotlight with it. Like that to me makes a lot of sense. Now they did drop down Scar, so it is cheaper to get now. But I do still think it's a good idea. Anytime you're having these synergistic, overtly synergistic cards, you want to like open it up for the players that you don't have tokens. Like, hey, you can just get the card as well, and you're good to go. You know, I think that's a good idea. So happy with that. Fastos, never been a Fastos fan. Still, will continue not to be a Fastos fan. However, the card is popular. People like playing with it. You know, I'm not really going to hate on this card, but yeah, it's playable. I personally don't like the card, but if you do, you know, just have your fun, right? That's what matters. So, Starbrand Scar, good combo, nice to get. Fast. If you want Fastos, then this is a good spotlight. Like if you want Fastos, it's a good spotlight. If you don't want Fastos, eh. If you want Starbrand by itself, it's actually decent. If you just want Starbrand, you already have Scar. You want that. Like this is a decent one. Like C tier is not bad. So, well, it's not the best, but like I can understand it if you want Starbrand. Starbrand seems pretty powerful to me. Might be like the most generically strong card of this spotlight of this month, and there are a lot of good cards this month. Yeah, that's my take on this particular. Next up, we have Firehair. Now, this card is somewhat hard to evaluate, right? When one of your cards is destroyed, this uses that card's on reveal. So you need to be playing destroy mechanics, you need to be playing on reveal mechanics, right? And then if you're doing both, when you destroy things, you'll trigger the on reveal. To me, this is a easy misery synergy, right? Like misery or double proc, and that's probably the best synergy with this. But Venom also seems pretty good since you can steal the stats of whatever you're destroying and then still trigger the on reveal. So I think that's also a pretty powerful combo. And there's probably some other strategies that people are going to create with this that aren't like in the forefront of my mind, but it does seem like pretty good. Now, it does feel combo-y, I would say, which is like maybe the biggest weakness of these type of cards where you need Firehair on 2, and then you need your on reveal trigger maybe on 3 or later, and then you need your destroy, you know, on 4 or later, right? You need like 3 different pieces for it to work, right? And if your deck doesn't work, if the Firehead doesn't proc, then you have like this weird combo deck that is inconsistent, right? So um, that's like the downside I can see of this card, but it does have a lot of potential. And to me, this is the card that if you don't get, you're probably going to miss the most. Like you're probably going to be like, oh my god, look, there's this cool Firehair Misery combo deck that looks insane, but I don't have Firehair or Misery, right? And if you don't have Misery, I feel like this is very this gets a lot worse if you don't have Misery. Like I feel like Misery is the glue that makes this card have that consistency you need, because it does both of the effects for you, right? You'll trigger the odd reveal again and also trigger the Firehair, so you get the double proc. You could do like Firehair Electro into Misery, right? And then the Electro would trigger, then Misery would trigger the Electro, and then Firehair would trigger the Electro again, and then you'd get what 3 energy for the remaining 2 turns. Like yeah, that kind of stuff. Like that seems powerful to me, right? Where if you don't have Misery, then you lose a lot. Like let's say you go like White Tiger, Deathlock, or Venom or whatever you're doing, right? Like yeah, it's good. But like it's okay. I'm not like that impressed, but with Misery, I do think it becomes like a different story. So, um, with that in mind, like the cards is next to is also very good. They're all Series 5. They're all playable. They're all popular. I think this is the best spotlight of the month here. Where Fire, I think, is the most important card that you might miss. Nova's popular, still strong. It got better with Agamotto, funny enough, because there's more chance you'll have spells in your hand, and people are also like doing funky stuff where they're running like all the game start cards. So you might have those like insta win decks where people just have Thanos like, and RSM just for funsies, and you're just like, here's a Nova, just just ruin their life. But yeah, so there's that in meta context, and then you have Nico, which has just been a fantastic, one of the best one drops they've released, and it's just been good forever. So just a fantastically powerful set of cards here. So if you're missing all three, this seems like a no-brainer. If you're missing two, this seems pretty good as well. I think going for Nova is fine. Going for Nico is fine. So just seems like a really solid set of cards to pick up. So don't really have any issues with this spotlight at all. And then finally we have the Khonshu. So Khonshu is a 6/5. When discarded, returns to its next phase, and on reveal, it resurrects a card you discard to another location with its power set to 5. So essentially, you want to take advantage of the fact that you'll set the power right to 5 or higher. So that means cards that really like uh, have low base power really like Khonshu. So Iron Man jumps out to me, Gore jumps out to me. Those two really look quite strong, but anything with a nice low base power, it can be really good. And then it has two more effects. So even if you discard this is like a very common like Hella issue type thing where you're running Hella and then you play your discard and then discard your Hella and then you're like, I lost the game. Well, with Khonshu, that's not true. So if you discard Khonshu, it gets better. It becomes set to 7, and if you discard it one more time, set to 12. Now, set to 12 is so strong. Anyway, like that is not balanced in my opinion. Like set to 12 with like a Iron Man, a Gore, it wins you 2 lanes if you can do that. Essentially, right, you get 12 power in one lane, plus you'll get like more than 12 power. Essentially, right, you're going to be discarding like a Gore or Iron Man or anything with an extra effect on top. So it wins you that second lane, plus you get the 12 power to win it. Like if you can do the full moon, then it's really powerful, really impactful. Even 7 and 5 are okay. 5 I would say is a little bit on the weaker side. 7 I think is acceptable, and 12 is like nuts, right? So like you wanna aim for the 12, but even 7 I think is still pretty good. So this looks like a newer way to play discard, I guess, or like another way, because it's not really. I think you could run this with Agamotto, right? Like, because Agamotto also doesn't mind getting discarded, so you can run a bunch of discard procs plus a Agamotto plus a Khonshu, and then you're likely to draw one of the two, and then you can play around whichever one you draw, or you can just run off the dedicated Khonshu deck and see how that pulls off. But it's next to spotlights. The spotlights are also pretty decent, pretty powerful. So it's next to Corvus Glaive and Scorn. Now Scorn, everyone loves. Now this once again kind of similar to the Scar Spotlight. This is a discard centric Spotlight. So if you don't like discard, it doesn't really matter. Like none of these will be appealing to you. But if you do like discard, this is a fantastic Spotlight to get, specifically for Khonshu. So Corvus Glaive, I would say, is not been that popular these days. Like people have more dedicated bullseye. I'm discarding these specific one drops, Scorn and Swarm, those type of strategies. So Corvus Glaive, you get the energy, but you don't really care. You've already mapped out your turns essentially, so it's not that important. But with Khonshu, this extra discard is actually fairly relevant, and the extra energy is also fairly relevant. So I'd say like Corvus Glaive is like a perfect card to situate next to Khonshu because they do work together quite well, and then Scorn just been a good discard tool, kind of like X23, where it's like, this is good, this nice, fits in a lot of discard decks. You don't really mind having it in there. So seems like a fantastic discard spotlight to have here, next to the pieces you have, and then Khonshu seems strong. So I wouldn't be surprised if Khonshu's like has a good place in the meta once it comes out. It looks strong to me because you can work it with Gore, you can work it with Iron Man. Like those are pretty powerful cards if you can make them work. So seems good. So overall, like when we're looking at all of the new cards, like they all seem pretty powerful, pretty good to me. I don't think there's any card I like particularly dislike. There were a lot of people like hating on Eson because it got changed, but that version was never gonna survive. Like that card, that was like what, plus an extra 20 power for free. It was like, nah, there was no way. This one I think is more playable, more balanced, and it's still pretty strong if you have the setup, but it's more of a combo. It's more of a combo piece than a like I generically good. I win. I give everything buffs and I win, that kind of thing. And then the rest all makes sense. And then Agamotto is also pretty fun to play. So overall, pretty good month. Happy to see these, and hopefully with the series drops, there'll be more like balanced spotlights that aren't any skipping. Because the last month we had, I was like, most of these you can skip and you don't care. This one I would say, like, if you're skipping them, you have to really not like anything here. Like I feel like there's a lot of good spotlight weeks for players. So overall, pretty nice month, pretty nice setup. Really happy to see this. So hopefully they continue that trend. But other than that, that's all I got. Hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care of yourselves. Be good to each other, and I'll see you in the next one. I got the jingle here, so I probably should have started my speech. Well, this is good. Yeah, take care, everyone.